Today we're going to be comparing the Stokke Trailz and the Uppababy Vista. Both of these are top-of-the-line, terrain-capable Cadillac-style strollers. They both carry a high price tag, both come with a 3-year guarantee. You can expect both of these to last a long time, very comfortable to drive in both cases, and a lot of comfort for your child as well. They both weigh around 13 kilos with the seat installed. In this case I have the bags. That means the seat and the chassis at 13 kilos. In relation to the weight that the seat is capable of, this one claims 27 kilos, this one 15. What I found though is that this has a lot to do with the safety regulations. EU won't really allow manufacturers to claim anything more than 15 kilos. Both are around the same in terms of weight capacity in the shopping baskets as well, although there is a slight advantage with the Vista. When you're folding both of these strollers flat, they're going to be about the same dimensions in terms of length and width, but there's a definite height advantage when it comes to the Uppababy Vista because it folds flatter. It's easier to fold the seat flatter and the bag flatter as well than it is with the Trailz. Okay, a few notes on comfort of use with both of these strollers before we move on to the mechanics. The bag is more spacious on the Stokke Trailz. It's also a little bit more luxurious. I actually feel that the bag, the bassinet, should be a little bit larger on the Vista in general. It looks a little bit small in relation to the chassis. The seat, on the other hand, is larger by a little bit on the Vista, and it's a little bit more adjustable. As I mentioned before, there is a slight weight capacity advantage in the shopping basket of the Vista, and it is a little bit larger. The Vista is, in relation to folding the stroller, a lot easier to fold. All of the folding mechanisms are higher up, a little bit easier to access than they are on the Trailz. Not that the Trailz is particularly difficult, but it's a little bit less effort to fold it, and it does fold flatter, as I mentioned. Maintenance is also a little bit easier on a few points in relation to the Vista. So both of these are kind of complex internal mechanism type strollers. You're going to need to do a lot of lubrication in relation to all the mechanisms, and use a couple of types of lubrication when you include the front wheels as well. But other things in relation to maintenance with the Vista, such as removing the textiles, are a little bit easier to do in case you want to wash the textiles. And the Trailz also has air-filled tires, which has its own advantages, but in relation to maintenance does mean you might have to do some pumping, some patching, replacing of inner tubes and so on. I'm going to deal with the comfort of driving these strollers while I talk about the mechanics of the chassis themselves. Okay, starting from the top. The handle and running down to the central locking mechanism on the Uppababy Vista is quite a lot more rigid than it is on the Trailz. The handle runs with a telescopic sort of mechanism. This involves wires that run down the inside to the button at the top. You have a second telescopic or wire type system here with the central fold. Now, the advantage to having this rigid sort of a handle versus the jointed handle adjustment, height adjustment sort of thing that you have going on the Trailz, is that it's going to feel more solid while you're, for example, trying to go up over curbs and so on. In addition, there's quite a lot of metal going on with the handle and the central mechanism itself. It has these nice large support struts here. In general, what I would say about the Uppababy Vista is that when everything is functioning as it should inside, and this is going to have a lot to do with lubrication and maintenance, then this is going to be a more sturdy and stable sort of construction for the upper end of the stroller. It's quite intelligently designed. The Trailz is not bad as well, but it does have quite a lot of points of articulation where the handle connects to this mechanism, where the mechanism has the joint in the middle and then connects to the bar and then connects to the central mechanism. And a lot of these points of articulation involve quite a bit of plastic. What happens over time is that it is going to feel a little bit looser as you use the stroller. Both of these are intended to carry quite a lot of weight. This is not poorly designed in that sense, but it will get looser over time than this very rigid, stable setup that you have on the Uppababy Vista. Part of the reason for needing such a stable upper end or larger element of the chassis here is because the stroller is designed with the capability of using it for 2 children. So it's going to take a lot more weight in relation to how you have to push the handle. I would imagine if you had two children in this stroller and you had the jointed sort of a handle, there would be a danger of the handle joints breaking. Okay, when we're looking from the central locking mechanism and down, I personally see a lot of mechanical advantages with the Trailz over the Vista. Looking at suspension, the Trailz has this nice big fat suspension element in the middle. That coupled with the air-filled tires creates quite a lot of suspension or shock absorption ability versus the Vista. The Vista claims to have suspension on all four wheels, but what they're really talking about is the material that they've made the tires out of, which in itself is inferior anyway to having air-filled tires, and it has no inbuilt suspension. There's no large springs that are going to bounce the chassis as you move. Also on the back end is the brake system. The brake system on the Trailz was recently redone. It's quite simple. There's a lot of fail-safes involved in this so that the brake system does not damage the wheels. It has metal bar that runs through the center as opposed to a brake wire sort of a system. It's simpler and designed, I think, in a little bit better fashion than the Vista. The Vista has one of these on-off brakes, which kind of adds a number of unnecessary plastic parts inside. Anytime you have unnecessary plastic parts and complexity, you have more things that can go wrong and break. In addition, something I kind of dislike is that the wire runs through the central metal bar to the other side. This is going to make it quite difficult to switch out the wire or other brake parts if you have trouble with the brake system. Okay, looking at the front ends, I would again give the advantage to the Trailz. It has a lot more suspension than you find on the Uppababy Vista. This is due to a few factors. Inside on the top of the fork, here you have a large spring-loaded pad that holds the wheel tightly against the inside of the housing mechanism, and this protects the housing mechanism from wear. You do not have this present on the Vista. You have something smaller above the locking pin, a small pad that sticks out from the side and tries to hold the axle a little bit more in place, but it's not going to do the same amount of good in relation to protecting the longevity of the overall housing and wheel system. That coupled with a smaller wheel here and an air-filled tire on this side, what this is going to mean for you is that you're going to have a lot more off-road terrain sort of capability with the Trailz, and the longevity of using this sort of stroller in terrain, if you tend to take it out off-road, there's going to be a lot less wear to the chassis on the front end with this stroller than there is with this. One final note that's a little bit smaller, the swivel locking mechanism on this stroller is a little bit simpler. Again, they went with the click on, click off sort of system here as they did with the brakes, and I find that to be unnecessarily complex and just another area that can develop faults after a while without there really being a purpose. They could have put a much simpler button on it. So which one of these strollers is better? Well, it's really easy. You get yourself a power saw and a welding torch and you just slice it right in the middle and then you weld them together. Now, both of these are really, really good strollers. After the Buffalo left the market, these are really the top two large Cadillac type strollers. There's advantages and disadvantages to both. I think a lot of it actually comes down to the location of the manufacturers. So Stokke is a European brand. They focused a lot on suspension, but people here tend to use their strollers a little bit more with public transport. There are cobblestones on the streets of pretty much every major European city, and there's a lot of taking your stroller out in off-road conditions, walks in the woods and so on. This Uppababy is an American brand, right? So there's a lot more focus on how small you can fold it while still having a large, luxurious stroller, because you're going to need to put it in a car. There's also a little bit less emphasis on terrain because the city streets tend to be a little bit, flatter. You're not going to find cobblestones, and people tend not to go in really heavy off-road sort of conditions with strollers. A lot of the parks in America are a lot more manicured, I suppose one could say, smoother to drive on and so on. For me, the Trailz is a bit better, fits my conditions a little bit better. I also kind of like the emphasis on suspension and air-filled tires and a little bit more driving capability with a larger, heavier stroller, simply because I think it fits a little bit better with the niche. If you're going to go for something that's larger and heavier, I would want it to be as terrain capable as possible. But again, that has a lot to do with the conditions in which I live. Both of these are very, very high quality strollers, and I could really recommend either to you. It has a lot to do with where you live and the purpose to which you plan to use the stroller. In any case, that was our comparison of the Uppababy Vista and the Stokke Trailz. We hope this video has been interesting to you, and if it has been, we ask you to subscribe as it helps us continue making videos in the future. Thank you.